Hi, everyone. Welcome back to SciComm with Mel. I'm your host today, Mel. Hope the coffee is fresh and hot. Let's dive into today's fascinating topic. Last week, I talked about advancements in pancreatic cancer detection for humans. But one of you listeners reached out to me and asked to focus on other animals. So let's do that. Sometimes science throws us these really interesting curveballs that make us completely rethink what we thought we knew. And today, we're going to talk about one of those moments. There's this brand new study that's totally shaking up what we thought we knew about cancer in large animals. There's something called Peto's paradox. It's actually been kind of a head scratcher for scientists for quite a while now. You see, logically speaking, larger animals should have much more cancer than smaller ones. I mean, think about it. They've got billions more cells. And those cells are dividing like crazy throughout their lives. But here's where it gets really interesting. For the longest time, scientists noticed something super weird. Whales, which are absolutely massive, weren't getting more cancer than, say, mice. This totally went against what we'd expect, right? I mean, more cells should equal more chances for something to go wrong. This weird disconnect where animal size didn't seem to have anything to do with cancer rates. That's what we call Peto's paradox. Scientists were honestly pretty stumped by this for years. How could these huge animals with all these cells somehow dodge the cancer bullet? It just didn't make sense, you know what I mean? And the thing is, this paradox has been such a big deal in biology that it's influenced how we think about cancer development and evolution for like decades now. It's actually pretty mind-blowing when you really think about it, or at least it was until this new research came along. So here's where things get really interesting. This new study that just came out in PNAS, it's actually turning everything we thought we knew about Peto's paradox completely on its head. The researchers actually found that um, bigger animals do get more cancer, at least when we're talking about land vertebrates. They looked at this huge range of species. We're talking mammals, birds, reptiles, amphibians, and what they found was pretty clear cut. The larger the species, the more likely they were to develop cancer. But, and this is where it gets super fascinating, they found something else that's absolutely mind-blowing. In quite a few of these larger species, the increase in cancer wasn't nearly as high as you'd expect given their size. They've developed some kind of special defense mechanisms against cancer over time. The really cool thing about how they did this study is that they use these super advanced methods. They were looking at the evolutionary relationships between different species and everything. They weren't just counting cancer cases, you know. They were diving deep into how these animals evolved and adapted over time. And get this, they found that in birds and mammals that evolved to be bigger really quickly, relatively speaking in evolutionary terms, these species actually showed lower cancer rates than you'd expect. It's almost as if nature found a way to help protect them as they got bigger. I mean, that's just wow, right? Nature never ceases to amaze me with how it figures these things out. So, what do the experts have to say about all this? Dr. Frederick Thomas and Dr. Antoine Dujon are pointing out that a lot of this depends on how the statistics were crunched. You know what I mean? But here's where it gets really cool. The experts are saying that it's not just about whether bigger animals get more cancer. It's about whether they're getting as much cancer as they should be, given their size. Basically, if you've got way more cells, you should technically have way more chances for something to go wrong, right? And Dr. Lisa Abeglin, she's actually one of the researchers whose data was used in this study. She makes this super interesting point. She's saying that Peto's paradox might still be real, but maybe not for every single species out there. It's like Nature's got different rules for different animals, if that makes sense. The really exciting part, and this is what's got a lot of the scientists pumped, is what this means for human cancer treatment. These experts are saying that if we can figure out how these larger animals are keeping their cancer rates lower than expected, well, that could be absolutely huge for developing new cancer treatments for humans. Dr. Amy Boddy brings up this really good point, though. We've got to be careful about jumping to conclusions because some of these species they looked at only had data from 20 individuals. So there's still more work to be done. But man, the potential here. Now, let me tell you about probably the most fascinating example in this whole story: elephants. These magnificent creatures are basically walking, breathing case studies when it comes to this research, and they're throwing curveballs our way. Let's focus on Asian elephants and African elephants and what happens when it comes to cancer resistance. The Asian elephants, which is the smaller of the two, well, they're actually showing up as vulnerable to cancer. Meanwhile, African elephants, which are again the bigger of the two species, they're showing incredibly low rates of cancer. And this is actually kind of a perfect example of what the researchers are talking about. Like, because even though the study's saying bigger animals tend to get more cancer, some species are clearly doing something really special to beat those odds. The African elephants, they've basically figured out some sort of super powered cancer defense system that we're still trying to understand. This is the kind of stuff that's got scientists really excited. Because, if we can figure out exactly what these African elephants are doing differently, like what special cellular tricks they've got up their sleeves, that could be absolutely huge for developing new ways to fight cancer in humans. So, what does all this mean for the future of cancer research? These findings are opening up a whole new pathway for how we might approach cancer treatment and prevention. We're discovering that certain species have evolved these incredible anti-cancer mechanisms over time. It's quite fascinating from a therapeutic perspective. If we can dig deep and understand how these animals, especially the larger ones, that should be getting tons of cancer, but don't, and yet they're actually protecting themselves, well, you must stop and ask yourself, how are they doing it? I absolutely love how science keeps surprising us, showing us that even things we thought were pretty solid, like Peto's paradox, can be turned on their head when we look a bit closer. And that's really what makes science so exciting. There's always more to discover. So, as you go about your day, maybe take a moment to think about how amazing it is that studying these animals could potentially help us fight cancer in totally new ways. Thanks for geeking out with me today on SciComm with Mel. Remember, every Wednesday morning, grab yourself a cup of coffee or tea and sit back with me. We explore all things science. Episodes roll out Wednesday mornings, 10 a.m. GMT. What did you think about today's focus? Would you have agreed with these scientists? Larger animals means greater risk for cancer? Or would you have puzzled over it for decades? See you next week.